It was the 1960s in Brooklyn. My grandfather had gone upstate to a Knights of Columbus retreat, which left my grandmother alone with the kids. Around midnight, the TV went to static, so she went outside to fix the antenna. The first thing she noticed was the silence. That was what bothered her the most. Brooklyn is never silent. Even at night, there is always some residue of human life. But that night, the whole neighborhood felt muted. Then she felt watched. She looked up and saw a glowing disc above the neighborhood. Huge, about the size of a school bus, just suspended there. A giant impossible object sitting where no object should be. Then it communicated with her, directly via her mind. It told her that they were going to borrow her. She answered that she could not leave because she had babies inside. It replied that the kids wouldn't even notice she was gone. Terrified, she ran to the neighbor's house and started pounding on the door, screaming for help. The next thing she noticed, she was awake. It was the next morning, in bed. So she got out and left the house. She went to her neighbor's door and noticed it was covered with bang marks. The neighbors came outside, furious, saying somebody must have vandalized our front door. My grandmother played dumb and asked them if they heard anyone bang on it. They said no. My grandfather came home and she told him the story. And like any mid-century man whose first instinct was social survival, he told her never tell a f***ing soul, because they would send her to an asylum. So she didn't. She only started telling about it decades later. And last year, while she was dying, I visited her in hospice. I asked her one last time. I said, "Nana, do you still stand by that story with that UFO from the 60s? And she told me, yes, even more so now that she is dying. That story is why I have been interested in the subject my entire life. Not because I think every blurry light in the sky is a spaceship, but because from the beginning, the phenomena never sounded to me like a clean nuts and bolts event. It sounded like something much stranger, something that behaved like an intrusion into consciousness itself, notably how they communicated with her through her mind. And that is exactly why I think the so-called disclosure movement is mostly bullshit. For the last few years, starting in around 2017, the state has been drip-feeding UFO disclosure to the public through a very specific cast of characters. Former intelligence agents, quote-unquote journalists and insiders, and vague whistleblowers. All marching out with the same handful of claims, with the same frustrating pattern. It's always grainy FLIR footage, hearsay about how I know a guy who saw a classified file, and I cannot tell you, but the truth is coming. To me, it all seems like theatrics. The public is being trained to feel that something monumental is just over the horizon, while never actually being shown anything conclusive. You are being kept emotionally invested in a revelation that never arrives. That does not feel like a disclosure to me. The people pushing this narrative are not bona fide whistleblowers. Their job is not to reveal anything. Their job is to steer you. And what they are steering you toward is a very specific and very safe conclusion. The mainstream says these are probably advanced craft, or foreign technology, or at least some kind of object. While the contrarians in the space correctly reject the nuts and bolts aliens meme, but then they immediately replace it with another noun. They'll say it's demons, or fairies, or interdimensional fallen angels. Everyone wants it to be a being. Everyone wants it to be a species, or some stable category they can plug into the map. I do not think that is what it is. I do not even think the word they is quite right. I think it's closer to an it, what one would call a trickster god. A consciousness-based phenomena that can present itself however it wants. That is the part that the modern West has no category for, because we have been trained to think reality is basically made of objects bumping into objects. If something is real, it must be physical. It must cast a shadow. It must leave evidence and show up on a camera. And I think that assumption is exactly why this subject stays permanently unresolved. The phenomena may be very real without being physical at all. It may be agentic, sentient, and external, even terrifyingly real to the person experiencing it, while still not existing as a stable object in material space. Which sounds insane right up until you realize that this single assumption explains almost everything. It explains why experiencers are often so adamant. These people are not always lying. They are not always delusional. Many of them sound like people describing an encounter with something so genuinely outside their control and frame of reference, just like my grandma who swore until her death. But it also explains why they never seem to have good evidence either. Because if the thing they encountered is interfaced directly through consciousness, rather than through ordinary external perception alone, then of course they never have any physical evidence to wheel out to the public. Here is a theoretical example I use when discussing this subject to friends. Let's imagine a man in the California redwoods sees Bigfoot. He's not pretending. He really sees a large, sentient being in front of him. He is terrified. He interacts with it. But if you flew a drone above him and filmed straight down, you would record him staring at nothing at all. That does not mean he experienced nothing. It means the thing he met interfaced with him directly through consciousness, as if the entity itself was consciousness native, a creature that lives within the realm of mind and projects itself into our physical world as a sort of mirage or interface. This is where Carl Jung becomes useful, because Jung understood something most modern people still do not. He understood that the psyche is not this little private hallucination machine trapped inside a skull. He understood that there are things that dwell within the realm of the mind that behave with autonomy. Aside from Jung, you have another titan in the field, French ufologist Jacques Vallée, who I think more people should read. Vallée looked at the UFO phenomena and noticed it does not behave like contact with a spacefaring civilization. It behaves like the latest mask worn by a much older phenomena. In one era, it presented itself to people as angels. In another region, it presented itself as fairies, and in another as demons, and in another as jinn. And in the late 1800s, it portrayed itself as airships flying over the Midwest and California. The form changes alongside the culture it presents itself to. The underlying structure does not, and that should tell you something. A literal extraterrestrial species would not need to dress itself up in contemporary symbols of each age. A consciousness-based trickster phenomena would. And once you start looking at it that way, a lot of the paranormal begins to click into place. My personal theory, and yes, this is just a theory, is that there are entities, or maybe just one entity, that exists within the realm of consciousness. It's real, it has the ability to interact with us, it's sentient, but it dwells purely within qualia. It does not exist physically, it exists within the neurology of your head, or maybe it can only be perceived through the neurology of your head, but it doesn't have atoms or molecules. It's just purely a mind-based creature. And when you look at all different paranormal phenomena through that frame, even the weirdest and most unbelievable stories start to become really interesting. Because if people aren't really meeting monsters, ghouls, and aliens, but instead they're meeting entities that dwell within the mind, that is honestly, to me, much more terrifying, because then these things are always with us. The reason the modern secular person struggles with my theory is because the modern secular person thinks that consciousness is a side effect, a little wet computer spark produced by neurons. So the idea that consciousness could be an interface with other kinds of life sounds insane, almost even offensive. Now, here's the real reason I think that the government and the media push the nuts and bolts framework. I think because it's safe. A spaceship is safe. An alien species is safe. Scary, weird, sure, but safe in an ontological sense. You could add aliens to a physicalist worldview without breaking the model. All you've done is expand zoology, adding one more species to the list of known organisms. Congratulations, the universe has one more monkey in it. But the idea that there are intelligences or entities or a entity that are real and sentient while only being accessible through consciousness would detonate modern Western secular physicalism. The boundary between mind and world would start to blur. The old materialist arrogance would start to lose capital. The modern West would have to admit it built an entire civilization on a model of reality that might be incomplete at the foundation. The notion that the phenomena consists of metallic craft piloted by little green men from Zeta Reticuli wouldn't really disrupt anything at the ontological level. But if you tell people that there are things that exist that live inside your head or can only be met through your head, well, that's gonna f with a lot of people, and they're gonna stop paying their mortgages. And the state needs people to pay their mortgages. That is why I do not think this disclosure narrative is meant to reveal the truth. I think it is meant to contain the truth, to domesticate it, and to keep the public thinking in terms of physicalism, physical creatures, physical crafts, to keep the conversation in the ontology that governs the West, the idea that all that exists is what you can measure and touch. Because the moment you let people seriously entertain that consciousness may be a primary layer of reality, not just an accident, then the whole game changes. Then religion, mysticism, the paranormal, all the things modernity tried to exile start knocking at the front door once again. And yes, I know how this sounds. I know some of you will comment, "Broken Ruune, you are schizo. I'm unfollowing you. I followed you for the geopolitical takes, not this schizophrenic nonsense." But frankly, I don't give a shit. This subject has been flattened by people who are either too naive or too cowardly to let it remain weird. And from where I'm sitting, I think the universe is pretty weird. The UFO phenomena does not behave like visitors from another planet in any simple sense. It behaves like an intelligence that could enter human experience, shape a person's perception, and then leave behind just enough residue to haunt them. A machine leaves physical evidence. An alien species leaves a body. A trickster entity that interacts with you directly via consciousness leaves a civilization arguing with itself for 80 years. So no, I do not think they will ever tell you the truth. I don't think there will ever be actual disclosure. I don't think they're ever going to wheel out a craft or any bodies, because I don't think they have any. I don't think those things physically exist. I think they're lying to you and they're telling you it's a them, when really it might be an it. Aliens would be manageable. Aliens would just be biology. What I think we are dealing with is something that cuts much closer to the root. Something that does not just visit our planet, but reveals itself through the fabric of reality. And that is something far stranger than the modern world is allowed to believe. And if my little theory is true, then the real secret is not that we are being visited from the stars. The real secret is that consciousness was never as insignificant as they want you to think.